Works for me. Well, good afternoon, folks. I'd like to thank you for inviting me down here to Dallas-Fort Worth. This is a heck of a lot nicer than my most recent DEC venue, which was a place I can hardly even pronounce, Reykjavik, Iceland, from which I just got back 2 days ago, where I addressed the assembled multitude of DEC Iceland members, which numbered about 20. Now I see we have a somewhat better turnout here. I'd like to take about the next hour or until you start throwing things, other than these tickles at me, to just give you an update on the merger and the latest facts, rumors, and things of that ilk. So the usual stuff, trust but verify. I can't guarantee the correctness of my information, so as usual, always get an NDA or a PID, your friendly local digital salesperson, before you take my advice or anybody else's without a big grain of salt. Please excuse my American English. I haven't changed this slide since Reykjavik, but please excuse my Northeast USA English slang. I take no responsibility for using the information. Don't try this at home. And of course, we know that digital may call digital, or even digital in the bricks, but we all know it's DEC. Well, at least for a little while longer. We'll talk about that. Next slide. I made next exciting point. Oh, this one's got animation in it. You're going to hit it again. Well, obviously, the compaction of digital is an issue that I guess is on everybody's mind. So I'll talk about that. And just some things that I found as being an analyst and a member of the trade press that you may find interesting. Is Versed, which doesn't even exist yet, going to make sure that it's bedtime for alpha. We'll talk about that. And a little bit of stuff on architecture. So Mr. Zalewski stole some of my thunder by talking about wildfire, but I've got some slides that he doesn't. And just a little bit on operating systems, and I had to pick most of this out because Steve's already done Galaxies, but I've got a couple of gratuitous slides on that. And then finally, a review of my top 10 fearless prognostications for 1998. And if you were at DEC Anaheim last fall, you will remember I made the prognostications, and I've done pretty well so far this year, so I can do a little bit of back padding. Now, of course, they were easy predictions. Next. One of my favorite rock groups is the Rolling Stones, although I'm losing some of my my ability to hear high-frequency noises. But one of my favorite Stones songs is "You Can't Always Get What You Want." That again. So let's look at digital. What did digital want, or actually, what has digital really needed over the past several years? And I can think of three things. Perceived financial viability. You know, every quarter the question would come up: is Palmer toast yet? I remember one quarter I said, no, Bob Palmer isn't quite toast yet, but to tell you the truth, he's getting a real nice tan. Now that didn't go over too well with DEC PR, but the question has come up again and again. And even though I believe digital has returned, what's left of digital, has returned to financial stability, this was a recurring issue, and it was a problem for digital salespeople. There's also the issue of scale or size. This became apparent back when digital sold off the Cabletron unit. Remember Bob Palmer talking quite a bit about scale. And if you look at digital over the past 5 or 6 years, okay, they've cut the head count by 70,000. They've had all the workforce reductions, the layoffs. Revenue has stayed essentially flat. Well, while digital's revenue has stayed flat, everybody else has gotten bigger. Sun Microsystems is almost a $10 billion company now, which puts light to what I had said about 10 years ago when I worked at IDC, and I said, Sun, they'll never be a $4 billion company. They weren't for very long. But Sun has gotten bigger. HP has gotten bigger, and even Compaq. Compaq's roughly twice the size of digital. So digital no longer really had the scale clout to make it alone. And then finally, there was a need for some tarnish remover. There was some tarnish on the digital brand, certainly not on digital products, but there was just, you know, it was kind of a pickle-like odor around certain aspects of the company. So what does Compaq wanted, other than to, like Bill Gates, rule the world, or at least a major portion thereof? Well, a couple of years ago, after 5%, Compaq wants to be one of the top 3 players in the IT industry. They want to be a big dog. Well, in order to do this, you got to have global service and support. Of equal importance, you need enterprise products. In fact, you'll note that Compaq got into a little bit of financial trouble this last quarter for the same reason that DEC's PCBU did 2 years ago. Stuffing the channels and PC pricing implosion. The way the PCBU got out of its little pickle was by moving up market and emphasizing the enterprise and just doing away with this retail commercial desktop stuff. Compaq has to do essentially the same thing. The company needs enterprise-class products, they need turbo lasers and wildfires, and they need people who know how to do an enterprise sale. StorageWorks might be a real nice thing to have. In fact, if you look at StorageWorks' run rate, right now, hardware, software, and services, aggregate, it's around $2.5 billion. They do this with 1,500 employees, and that's revenue per employee of what, about $1.5 million apiece, which is very enviable. And Digital StorageWorks and Compaq Storage together make up, I think, 51% of the Windows NT storage market. StorageWorks would be nice. So would some internet technology. Every enterprise player has to have an internet strategy, or at least a presentation which claims that it has an internet strategy. Next slide. So it was time for a new, I make a small play on words here, IT industry compact. Next. And of course, as Jagger said, you just might find you get what you need. Once more. And look at this Bill Gates animation. Isn't this great? You know, we now have the mother of all IT industry mergers. Well, let's talk about, one more. Let's talk about the merger and some of the assimilation issues. I'll go through the negatives first. There are clearly some issues that need to be solved, and the trade press and the Grand Trabazes and high muckety-mucks have all said, no, this will never work. Can't work. One reason it won't work is human factors. How are we going to merge these two corporate cultures? Well, if you look at the number of digital executives who have gone to work for either Compaq or Tandem, I submit that the actual assimilation process probably won't be all that difficult. John Rose was at Digital in the PC group, and he was kind of drummed out. That's probably the best thing that ever happened to him, because he's now the number two or number 3 guy at Compaq. Enrico Cacciatore and Pauline Nist both went to Tandem. So did John O'Keefe, who used to run Digital Unix. And there's a number of other reasonably high-ranking Compaq folk who came from Digital. Next. On the technical front, one of the first things the trade press and the analysts said, Compaq bought Digital, OpenVMS is toast. Clearly they're going to do away with Alpha. They don't need Digital Unix. And in fact, conventional wisdom had it they didn't need much of anything. I would submit that the opportunities inherent in some of Digital's key technologies, Alpha and OpenVMS in particular, justify their assimilation into the Compaq model. And I think we'll see that happen. One more. Now, while there's some tarnish on the Digital name, perhaps, there's no real problem with the Digital brand. So when I see these references to, brand equity is going to be a big problem. Well, if it's going to be a big problem, they can always do away with the brand name. But I really don't believe that Digital's, the actual Digital brand or Digital's reputation for technology is an issue that will be perceived as negative by the Compaq customer base. One more. On the install base, this is one thing that I believe Compaq is aware of. Compaq may not yet know what it is really required in all dimensions or in the total depth, but I believe Compaq has got to stress business as usual. And indeed, if you look at the Tandem acquisition, which occurred, I believe it was last July, it took Compaq until February of this year to actually get around issuing Compaq badges to the tandem people. Well, this acquisition is going to be on the fast track. I think it's all going to be said and done by the middle of June. But I would expect to see, wherever possible, business as usual. Next. Well, tonight I've prepared not one, but 3 top 10 lists for you. We'll go through the first one. What's good about the merger? First thing, if you look at the coverage models and the channel strategies between Digital and Compaq, there's very little overlap. This is probably going to work out quite well. I know that many of the channel partners that I've talked to, particularly the digital channel partners, are not overly concerned. Now, maybe a company that's up around $40 billion, whatever the merger is going to result in, will have enough clout to get better volume discounts from Bill Gates. This would be a nice thing. And as I mentioned earlier, with people like Pauline Nist and John Rose, we have a lot of the best and the brightest alumni reunited. Frankly, I'd rather see them reunited than going off to Sun Microsystems or perish the thought with Hewlett Packard. Next one. Now, perhaps we'll get better volume discounts from Andy Grove. That too would be nice. And global service and support, that's certainly not an issue any longer for Compaq. Next page. It's slow, it's Microsoft software. Doesn't animate that well. Digital Unix. I know this is a VMS-centric event, but all of a sudden Digital Unix is no longer the crazy ant in the digital operating system basement. It is getting some credibility and converts. Next one. And financial problems? Well, basically, what financial problems? That's no longer a competitive knockoff that's going to hold much water. Next. And scale? Yeah, scale's important now, but it's important mainly to rivals. All of a sudden, Sun Microsystems don't look so big at $10 billion. And all of a sudden, Hewlett Packard isn't as big as they used to be. Now, back off HP, we're the big dog on Windows NT block now. And then finally, as a consultant, that's goodness. Next. Some recent developments. A week ago today, time flies when you're having fun, Digital had a Digital Unix Executive Summit in New York City. I call it a Digital Unix Love Fest. And basically, this was put together to counteract some of the competitive FUD that people like Hewlett Packard have been spreading around. Basically, we had Larry Ellison, Bob Palmer, and their new friend, Eckhard Pfeiffer, go to New York City for their Excellent Adventure Part 3. 3 years ago, they went down for their first Excellent Adventure, which was Turbo Laser running Oracle BLM. 2 years ago, it was Excellent Adventure Part 2, where they did true clusters and a new release of Oracle. Well, this time, we have Eckhard Pfeiffer up on the stage. And to make a long story short, actually it wasn't a very long presentation. Palmer talked for 5 minutes, Pfeiffer talked for 5 minutes. Poor old Larry Ellison, he only got about 3 minutes to talk. The bottom line is Compaq is serious about alpha. If you've seen on the web or in any of the news groups the translation that was done of Eckhard's speech at CA World down in the Big Easy a couple of weeks ago, basically Eckhard said Compaq loves industry standards or industry standard technology. And now that alpha is being widely adopted by Samsung and AMD and the like, it is an industry standard architecture, so we love it too. And he went a step further to say that, do you know that in just 1 year, we'll be selling an enterprise server that does 200 TPMC based on industry standard technology. Can you say wildfire? Sure you can. That's exactly what he was referring to. Compaq is equally serious about Digital Unix. What came out at the New York City event is that Digital Unix, despite all of Compaq's profession of love for SCO a couple of months ago, SCO is going to be relegated to the 32-bit role. Digital Unix is going to be the 64-bit Unix. So I wonder what's going to happen down the road for SCO. I do know that they're looking at possible interoperability between Digital and Unix and SCO at the API, and application development tool level. And finally, I Today or tonight I wore my IBM shirt so nobody thinks I'm a DEC shill, right? Well, I had to play DEC shill at the event last week because people were asking all these questions about digital Unix and Alpha and Windows NT. So I asked the obvious throwaway question of Eckert. Hey guy, you've said all this wonderful stuff about Alpha and digital Unix. What about OpenVMS? And he basically said, well, we looked at OpenVMS and evaluated it even before the merger took place. And as long as customers want OpenVMS, we will support it. So I think that makes it incumbent upon those of us who are VMS bigots to make Compaq Corporation aware that there are people still interested in OpenVMS. And I don't know how you do that. Keep my name out of this if you decide to do it, but Eckert Pfeiffer's email, it's like Bob Palmer's, it's eckert.pfeiffer@compaq.com. So that might be one thing you can do. But again, keep my name out of it because I'd like to do some business with those people. And, if you write to me, Shannon told me I should write you a letter about OpenVMS, I don't think that would improve my standing. But it was good to hear Pfeiffer say something positive about OpenVMS. Next slide. Even more recent developments. It seems that weird things happen in digital, or there's always breaking news when I'm on my way out of the country. Last fall, I was heading over to DEC Europe in Copenhagen when the Wall Street Journal story on the sale of Alpha to Intel, which is how they framed it, that broke. Well, I was on my way to Reykjavik, Iceland last Wednesday. I was leaving Wednesday night. Wednesday morning, this story comes on CNN Financial News. Digital filed its proxy statement regarding the impending acquisition. And the proxy statement said between $1.5 billion and $2 billion is going to be dedicated to restructuring charges. So CNN immediately figured, okay, this means digital is going to cut 15,000 jobs. And we had the usual tempest in a teapot. The local news media in Boston picked it up. It was kind of funny. If you looked, one of the last things I did before I went to Iceland was look at some of the news coverage, and they showed a reporter lady standing next to PKO3 in Maynard, not even out at Powder Mill Road. And then we had the gratuitous and obligatory pictures of digital computers being assembled. They were all VAX 8600s. So, now, conventional wisdom has it that there will be a headcount reduction of 15,000. I don't know. I don't believe anybody really knows. Myself, I can't do the math and come out with any way to take 15,000 people out of the digital workforce and have anything viable left. Now, there are 230 vice presidents, and that might be a very good start, but we still have to go another 14,770 people. So even when you get rid of the PC business unit and the Department of Redundancy Department and all the areas of overlap between the two firms, financial, human resources, payroll, and heaven knows what else, I still think it's going to be tough to get to 15,000. But whatever. More secret facts will be revealed very soon now. As Pfeiffer said in New York City, the last step in the acquisition, at least he's finally coming out and calling it an acquisition and not a merger. He said that the last step will be the stockholders meeting in Westford, Massachusetts on the 11th of June. If you got digital stock and you're in the neighborhood, be there or be square. It should be an interesting meeting. Next. Well, mergers seem to be the real big thing these days in just about any industry, and typically they're not very good. Remember we used to have dozens and dozens of banks. You could use ATM machines for free. Now there's only about 5 or 6 banks on the planet, and going to an ATM machine is like going to a one-armed bandit. We have seen mergers...
bandit leaves more money behind.
That's true. That's true. We have in the healthcare industry, we have more mergers and worse health insurance. The big 8 have become what? The big 5, big 4, whatever it is this week. But it hasn't really hit the computer industry so far. What people will say is, hardware mergers have never worked. And in fact, if you looked at the creation of Unisys, what an utterly abhorrent name for a company. But when Burroughs and Sperry Univac merged, they expected they were going to be able to grow and this was going to be successful. Come on, they had an 80% overlap in their product lines and their potential target markets. So obviously they didn't grow. But there's, with digital and compact, the overlap is far less. It's anywhere between 15 and 20%. And indeed, even in shops where you have either digital desktops or compact desktops, the overlap there is only 15 to 20%. So this may not be as bad as some of the doomsayers predict. I don't know, but I would take some of the gloom and doom with a grain of salt. But if we look at what might happen, okay, Sun Microsystems, Smiling Scott's got a lot of money. He can't afford to take over and kill Microsoft, but he's got enough money that he can buy somebody else. You know, he made a run once at Apple, now downsized into a mere applet. Somebody will pick them up. Okay. Dell Compute, Data General, who's in my neck of the woods, near Ashland, the toxic waste capital of Massachusetts. Somebody will pick them up. Conventional wisdom has it it's going to be either Dell or Sun. I always thought Dell was more likely, but there's been a recent influx of Sun people to Data General. And boy, wouldn't that be an interesting acquisition? Because if that happened, all of a sudden Sun, like it or not, has an NT strategy. So we'll see what happens there. Hewlett Packard, they'll probably grab somebody. Compact and SCO, hey, anything's possible. IBM, and then finally, at the end of the day, whatever's left, Microsoft will get everything else. Next. So, in my role as journalist, analyst, rumor monger, and warlord, there are some issues I'd like to discuss. I got 3 of them: fear, uncertainty, and doubt, something from American politics, and just do some much-needed beating up on the old digital marketing strategy. Next one, Bud. You remember back on January 26th, Digital announced that it was going to merge with Compaq. It was February 3rd or 4th in the Wall Street Journal that our good friends at Hewlett Packard came out with their ad, Digital committed to Unix, until last week. And then they did their sold and worried bricks ads. And just to make sure that they rubbed a lot of salt into the wounds, they did the Digital committed to Unix until last, actually this is a slide from Australia, because that was the wording down there. It was until last month. It took them a month to get their ad going down there. That ad lasted 1 day in Australia, because Digital's lawyers called Hewlett Packard's lawyers and said, cease and desist. And I understand that there may be a lawsuit in progress, just to keep all the lawyers busy. So what we've seen since then is the trade press doing its usual job of informing the marketplace about what's happening, or what they think is happening, or what might happen, or what should happen, and what probably won't happen. And the analyst community hasn't been very much better in that regard. I recall on January 26th, I forget the analyst's name, and I wouldn't even mention it, but his pronouncement on the Digital acquisition was, oh, Digital's going to cut at least 20,000 jobs. Now he says this based on an analyst teleconference and maybe 5 minutes of thought. Now I submit that before you make a pronouncement like that, you do your homework, you try to check the facts. But thus far nobody has, and I believe that FUD is still Digital's main enemy.
How many employees are there altogether?
At Digital, I think Compaq is 33,000. I think. I'm honestly not sure. Digital's around 53,000 right now. Now they'll be dropping 2,000 as a result of the Intel acquisition of Palmer's Folly, the White Elephant Fab 6 plant. But we're looking at somewhere right around 50K right now. So we have a company that's about 40%, 35-40% larger than Digital, or 35-40% smaller than Digital, yet they're bringing in more than twice as much money. So obviously there are going to be some serious workforce reductions. As for the truth will set you free, I was in one of the alphabet agencies once, a very close relative of the one that uses that as their slogan, and at least digital has started to respond to the FUD. The event in New York City, the Unix Love Fest, was an attempt to respond. So what's HP really saying? Managing Director of Digital Australia for that slide. But frankly, I think HP doesn't protest too much. They've got some issues they got to deal with pretty soon now. You know, little things like migration, little things like moving to IA64. Not to worry, we'll beat up on them a little bit later. Digital and its old marketing strategy. I love to use this political parable. Bill Clinton, he had this sign in his war room. It's the economy, stupid. And to me, Clinton, you may infer that I did not vote for the guy either time. So I'm in the majority of Americans, but nevertheless, he got elected. What we have here is the Democratic Party successfully marketed damaged goods. You know, the bingo eruptions, the guy had a high level of negatives. But whenever the Republicans threw anything at Clinton, you know, he'd fire back with a few megatons. He'd fire back with a MERV FUD display. And the Democrats have been very successful with mattress. A couple of years ago, every time a Democrat talked about anything, they were talking about, well, this wouldn't be good for Medicaid, Medicare, education, and the environment. Or this tax proposal does not favor Medicaid, Medicare, education, environment. And you heard this about 100 times a day. And of course, the talking heads, Dan Rathers and everybody, they kept saying Medicaid, Medicare, education, environment. Worked quite effectively against the Republicans. This year, hey, you can't use the same mantra 2 years in a row. I'm sorry, that's against the rules. Have you noticed that no matter what the Democrats talk about, and increasingly the Republicans, it involves the children? You know, be it a space shuttle, or the excise tax on tires, or smoking, obviously, but whatever. We're always talking about the children. And folks, it works. It may not be true, but it works. It's the old expression, you repeat a lie long enough, people will believe it. It may not become true, but they'll believe it. Now, how have the Republicans responded? Next slide. Thank you. Digital just sat there and took it from the competition. We don't see the balance as much. Yes, the marketing manager is back there in the car. He's on his cell phone. Okay, I promised to talk about processor futures, and this is something that has astounded me right from the get-go. It was June 3rd, 1994, that Intel and Hewlett-Packard announced a new architecture for the new millennium, except it was going to be available in 1997. Sure, we promised. And it was going to be revolutionary. It was going to have predictive logic and very long instruction word technology and Fouvered code processors and special sauce, and it was going to be better than Alpha, and you can trust us because we're Intel and we're HP. Well, I asked them during their initial press conference, gee, this sounds good. You say it's going to be better than Alpha? Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely much, much better than Alpha. So that's what the trade press writes. Well, what about your roadmap? Can I see your processor roadmap? No. Okay, I can understand that. Maybe you have one of those roadmaps like they used to have in the Soviet Union where they deliberately offset every city 30 miles and we Yankee spies would get lost if we went over there. So you won't give me a roadmap. What about your design team? Surely you can talk about your architectural teams, who you've got from HP, who you've got from Intel, where they're located, what they're working on. No. Oh, then I'm supposed to accept this at face value because you're Intel and HP? I don't think so. But most people have. And what we have today is, even though it does not yet exist, this pill is less of a figment of the imagination than is Merced. I understand there are some prototypes out there. They look like a brick. with a beer can with fins next to it, and the beer can with fins is to prevent the critical management problem that these people will face. But anyhow, IA-64, P7, or 7, whatever you want to call it, has officially won. It's been declared the victor. You know, in the year 2001, 2002, everybody and his brother and his sister, and of course their dogs, will be selling IA-64-based servers. Which, all of a sudden, it seems to me, wait a minute, if everybody's got the same architecture, the same product, how do you differentiate? Clearly not on performance anymore.
Must be price.
Well, is 100% Intel inside world inevitable? I don't really think so. Is it beneficial? Well, remember that Intel has had problems in the past. You remember the mathematically challenged Pentium processor that had a wee bit of trouble with square roots? Or when Pentium Pro came out, Intel loudly proclaiming, we are the fastest processor on the planet. We are faster than Alpha. And then they came back a couple months later and said, oops, it was kind of a small little glitch with one of our benchmarks. Yeah, a little glitch. And therefore our performance is 20% less than we claimed it was. And that actually put them below Alpha. And finally, assuming that we're going to have this Intel inside world, is it going to be immediate? No. There's little things like version 1.0 of anything ain't going to take over the world. And then you got to tune things like operating systems and database management systems and applications. I understand that Intel's goal is to start shipping samples of IA-64 by the end of this year. Even if they start getting samples out the door, look at how long it took Digital to get anywhere with Alpha, even after shipping seed systems in late 92.
But they've got that big factory.
They what?
They've got some great big factory.
That's nice. Size matters. They got some new factory. What are they going to manufacture?
Harry, they still won't admit anything about the architecture.
Okay, well, I can't get into the technical issues. I'm not a CPU developer. I don't have your level of expertise in that. But as we discussed this morning, they got some big issues to deal with. This, in my humble opinion, or even not so humble, arrogant if you will, IA-64 is not going to take over the world. I think people are going to ultimately realize, wait a minute, there are some issues here that everybody involved has to deal with. One of them, incidentally, we go back to our pickle here, is thermal management. This chip is going to be hot. We are looking at chips a couple of years out generating or consuming 400 watts of electricity. Now, Alpha EV6 consumes about 65 watts and has to dissipate about 65 watts. That, of course, is the same amount of power consumed and dissipated by a low voltage light bulb or a human being. But of course, we human beings, we have a certain amount of mass. It's like focusing all our heat on a fingernail or two fingers. Ouch! It gets real hot. It's going to get a lot hotter. And current techniques for thermal management just aren't going to work very much longer. You won't have, I will make a prediction that in the year 2000, when you got a gigahertz alpha, and I don't know how many hertz IA-64, those things will not be air-cooled. You're going to need more than a beer can with fins to handle this. And this is something that Intel, I don't think, has looked at yet. Digital has some very interesting plans for the second generation of Wildfire. I am under NDA from another company, so I can't go into that, but there will be a very chilling effect on microprocessors. So, as I mentioned earlier, is this 100% Intel inside world going to be a boon to enterprise class hardware? Probably not. Not when Intel's design center is for CPUs. You might be able to build a 32 CPU IA-64 based Wildfire, but the buses, the interconnects, nothing in the chip is designed for more than 4.
Terry?
Yeah?
But By the same token, Microsoft's domination of the software isn't a boon to much of anything, but they're still winning. I'm not sure that it being bad means that it's not going to happen.
This is true. Badness has prevailed a number of times. I think there are enough reasons that they may not prevail this time, and I'll try to go into some of those.
It's the same old story. Business put out ahead of time that they were going to
That's right. I had to vaccinate when it was the future. But, yeah, they've been ahead of themselves quite a few times. The rest of the world may be catching up, at least in the processor space. Next slide. What's going to happen in the processor space? Okay, 88K, it's toast. PA risk. Andy Grove took that off the table by co-opting HP into going the P7 route. MIPS, that's great if you got a PlayStation. There's more MIPS processors than anything else. They have the #1 embedded processor market share, but you don't see them many other places. PowerPC, well, their great expectations proved to be little more than a midsummer night dream, although they have developed a platform that does allow Mac OS to crash one hell of a lot faster than it ever did. But PowerPC, I don't think will be a keeper. Spark, well, Scott McNeely, he and the big teeth still has grand ambitions for Spark. You may have noticed that Smiling Scott is porting Solaris to IA64. There must be a reason for that.
Well, they had it a long time ago.
To what?
They had an Intel platform.
Oh yeah, 32-bit. But Spark's their 64-bit platform now or soon, or they claim. But they only made the decision or went public with we will port Solaris to IA64. They did that less than a year ago. I was at Sun's analyst briefing the beginning of this year, and that's where they announced their port and the reason for it. The year before, they were flat out saying, nope, no way in hell are we going to do this. We're going to remain true to our Spark architecture. I think they may be seeing the handwriting on the wall. So what's going to happen with Alpha? You're all familiar with the domino theory, if you're anywhere near as old as I am. Remember back there in the Vietnam era, the pro-war people said, hey, it's going to be like falling dominoes if we don't stop them in Vietnam, or Vietnam, as LBJ called it. We don't stop them there. We don't stop them in Thailand or Burma. They're going to take over Hawaii, and the next thing you know, they're going to be in crossing the Golden Gate Bridge. And, of course, they're already in Berkeley, California. So we have this theory of falling dominoes. And the same thing is applicable to processor architectures. Next slide. So, I'll preface this with yet another rehash of the Digital and Intel settlement. I'll go through this real quick. The reason being, there were a lot of misconceptions about what this meant. Digital sued Intel because, if you remember, when Pentium Pro came out, it was way fast. It was a lot faster than anybody expected, including Dick Sipes, the Alpha designer. It turns out that Pentium Pro was way fast because of branch prediction and cache management. A couple things that Alpha happens to do real well. So Digital sues Intel, and Intel does what every red-blooded American does when they get sued. They counter-sue, right? That's how you respond to something like that. So all that summer there were rumors, there was FUD, Digital no longer was going to have access to Intel technology, yada, yada, yada. And then on October 27th, the settlement was reached, despite what the Wall Street Journal erroneously reported on October 6th. Digital did not sell Alpha to Intel. Next slide. But what did happen was this, another top 10 list. Between the two companies, we were looking at probably about 20 different patents. 9 out of 10 top patent litigation attorneys claim that it cost $1 million to settle a single patent litigation issue. So the companies collectively saved $20 million. That's $20 million lawyers don't get to me. That's good. Digital got $700 million in cold, hard cash from Intel Corporation. This too is good. Intel got Digital's Fab 6 plant, Palmer's Folly, the White Elephant in Hudson, Massachusetts, that they could never crank up to capacity at below market price. Oh, did Intel pull a fast one on Digital by getting it at below market price? No, it was handled in such a way that nobody realized a tax loss or a tax gain in the actual transaction. So once again, the government and the lawyers didn't get anything. There was a 10-year patent cross-licensing agreement. Intel, of course, agreed to produce alpha chips for that, and then people got real concerned about that. Next slide. Digital, of course, kept the alpha franchise, roadmap, and engineers, moved down the road to Shrewsbury, but kept them nonetheless. Intel predictably got an IA-64 endorsement from Digital, and Digital announced it would port Digital Unix to IA-64. And Intel got the strong iron PCI and networking chip. Strong iron may end up being a big win for them. And finally, GQ Bob looked real good at the annual meeting on November 4th, having this settlement under his belt. Next slide. I kind of like Alpha. I'm an Alpha bigot. It was Digital who ripped off on November 10th, 1992, when Alpha was announced. I called it in some trade rag, fastest processor on the planet. Digital Semiconductor liked that slogan so much they took it over. I believe that continued performance leadership for Alpha is going to be inevitable, and the timeline's being collapsed. We're going to see newer Alphas sooner than we have in the past. Applications no longer is the issue it was. There's over 11,000 Alpha applications out there now. Of course, the biggest problem Digital had with Alpha is they announced an architecture. They announced a whole family of systems which had no applications, and in fact, right at the get-go, had only one operating system. No wonder they didn't sell any in the first year. But apps are no longer the issue they were. Digital is going fabless, and the fabless model seems to work quite well for some microsystems. And then, of course, we have the Samsung alliance that was announced back in February, and then more recently the AMD licensing pact. And it looks like even Big Blue might be getting into the Alpha game. Next slide. This is per the U.S. government endorsement of the deal, and it's kind of like, if you ever remember the fable, it's not politically correct or anything, but Brer Rabbit and Briar Patch. You know, don't throw me into that briar patch. Okay, it's come back again because the U.S. SEC approved DEC sale to Fab 6 plant, or they approved the deal with Intel Corporation. But there were caveats. Digital had to license Alpha to partners. Oh no! Don't make me do that. Don't make me give full intellectual property licenses to AMD and Samsung. You wouldn't want AMD to develop, or Samsung for that matter, to develop an Alpha chip with maybe an IA32 hardware decoding front end. No, you wouldn't want that. So, have any of you, do you recall reading Tom Sawyer, being forced to read that back when you were a kid in high school? Well, Tom Sawyer, he was faced with a problem. His wicked Aunt Polly forced him to spend one weekend, instead of in youthful dissolution, painting or whitewashing about the biggest fence on the planet. Now, Tom, he didn't want to spend the weekend whitewashing the fence. So he convinced his friends to do it for him. And he convinced them to pay him for the privilege. You know, he got money, dead cats, other fine things, and he got all his friends to do the whitewashing. And it appears to me that Mr. Palmer has become GQ Tom Sawyer in this regard, because he has finally achieved the Alpha goals under government mandate. Sometimes the government can be made to work for you. Next. Now, Samsung, this gets even more interesting. Samsung, stay tuned, it'll be another month or two maybe, but they are going to form an Alpha Volume company. Back in April, I was out at NAB 98, the National Alliance of Broadcasters conference in Las Vegas, and there happened to be an Alpha Alliance meeting there. And I happened to slip in the door just by kind of covering my badge. And I sat there and took notes. It was all very interesting. Samsung is going to, their goals are to proliferate Alpha, make it safe for the rest of the world, drive down the price points, increase applications availability, and compete head-to-head with Intel. The old 21164 PC chip, a non-starter, too little, too late, but we're going to see the prices on EV6 and EV67 technology coming down, and coming down soon. Samsung started sampling EV67, the EV6 architecture in CMOS 7 process last year. It was last November or December. I predict they will announce EV67 at around 800 megahertz at SIGGRAPH in Orlando this July, I guess the show is. So we're going to see some acceleration on the roadmap. Next page. Let's not even bother with this. This is gratuitous deck stuff. Other than, yeah, it's going to get fast, and it's going to get fast a lot faster. But once we start looking at 1,000 to 1,800 to however many gigahertz, thermal management issues are going to become real important, and things are going to have to be done differently. Next one. 21264, the only thing to point out here is initially DEC's goal was to come out at 500 megahertz, and they changed their mind and said, no, we'll do 6. It looks now like it's going to be roughly 30 spec in, 50 spec FP, 95 at 500 megahertz, and then 40 and 60 spec in, spec FP at the 600 megahertz level a bit later. It is running internally at 6. In fact, they've cranked it to over 900 internally. Thus far, but it's running at 600 now, and I think it'll reach over 800 megahertz this year, probably through Samsung. EV67, yeah, 767, 800 megahertz seems reasonable for that, and they'll be at gigahertz by year 2000. I believe well before. I think you could take an 800 megahertz EV67 and cool it down with a Cryotech chilling unit to 40 below zero, and boost its performance by 25%. And lo and behold, you're up to 1 gigahertz level. So from a performance standpoint, I don't think Merced is a threat. Next. Now this is proof that I can make PowerPoint bar charts. Now there are no comparisons here with IA64, because none exist. Have you noticed that? I always talk about this killer architecture. Nobody's come out with any performance estimates. If I were to guess, if I were going to be pessimistic for digital, I would say, I don't know, 50 and 70 spec in, spec FP, somewhere between EV6 and EV67 this year. Except the IA64 won't be available to us mere mortals this year. And I think moving on now, EV7, in fact, I don't even have room for EV8 on this. And I believe the numbers are accurate. I believe the numbers are far more accurate than what digital would like me to have. And that to me is always a good sign. But I think performance-wise, Alpha's going to continue to crank. Next.
Where does the PowerPC fit in that chart? Aren't they faster than the thing still?
What? Aren't what?
PowerPC also faster than the thing?
They could be. Oh, the G3 chip? Yeah, it's fast. But I don't know the, you work for digital, I have it now.
We got troops right here.
We have troops. Actually, I don't follow PowerPC that closely. They are such a shrinking portion of the market now that I don't think that PowerPC is going to be an issue 3 or 4 years down the road, other than embedded applications. So if we can hit that one more time. Talk a little bit about numbers. Steve said this afternoon, big systems are coming. Size matters, big is good, more is better. You've seen the Godzilla advertisement. Size matters. Well, just how important is more processors? Depends on what you do with them. Get that one more time. And I believe there are certain vendors, out on the West Coast in particular, who have this maniacal focus on processor count. Instead of silly little things like how does your application actually perform? And oh, by the way, what does this box cost? Yes. So, does the vendor with most processors win? Well, if he or she has a better marketing team and the general public is sufficiently gullible, yes. But Some questions to ask these people is, how do you exploit full 64 gigs of memory on a 32-bit system? Isn't that technically kind of difficult to do? Oh yeah, we can create dynamic system domains. Yeah, but you still can't exploit full 64 gigabytes of memory.
DKB.
Excuse me?
DKB.
Overlays. Yeah, I used to write those 4K Fortran overlays. And how much work do you get out of the 37th, the 43rd, or the 64th processor? And Steve pointed that out with Galaxy. This is one thing that Galaxy is going to do real well. Next. So what do you want? You want a whole bunch of CPUs? Well, Digital will sell you a whole bunch in Wildfire next year. Or do you want a competitive advantage over rival companies? Next. Now, we've already seen this slide. I ripped some of Steve's prior art off. Okay, big CPUs are coming. The one thing here is NUMA. Want to talk about NUMA? How can you have non-uniform memory access in a symmetrical multi-processing system? Something doesn't quite add up there. I do not profess to know all that much about NUMA. I know that Digital has looked at it. In fact, if I were privy to early information on the Alpha Server 4100 ROD, like the system reference manual, it might have made reference to a lot of NUMA-like stuff that Digital subsequently took out of the design, figuring the latency and other issues make it really tough enough to crack. Okay, next slide. And we've seen this one too. Yeah, you can just punch through that. Mine's animated, Steve's wasn't. But okay, right now you can 4 to 8 CPUs is about the best you're going to get with a conventional SMP system. Next slide. Now here's a slide you have not seen. You saw a similar one. But what Digital is moving to is a switch-based architecture, which instead of having flat SMP where you got CPU, memory, and I/O, boy, if you had 64 CPUs there, you know, you'd be taking the line way the heck out to here, and all of a sudden, latency becomes a real issue. The speed of light becomes an issue. And the way I heard Digital refer to some of the Wildfire work is schema, or sort of kind of uniform memory actually. And the idea here is to deliver more performance without modifying your programs. You know, your applications don't have to be NUMA aware. And the goal here is very low latency, no bottlenecks. You've got any-to-any connections between your memory and your CPU. And everything's going like a bat out of hell because of the system bandwidth. Next one. Now, I do recall seeing one similar to this today, but mine's different. It's different colors. I got it from somewhere else. This was not from Steve. But whole bunches of CPUs, probably 32 in the initial release. Whole bunches of memory, and of course, lots of PCI channels. The basic building block for Wildfire is going to be modules that have 4 CPUs and 4 2-gigabyte memory arrays. And of course, each one's going to have a local port and its own local I/O. And you'll rack and stack these things together using a second-level hierarchical switch. You may have, if you went to Jesse Lipcon's presentation on hardware futures last fall, you may have heard him referring to a hierarchical switch. In fact, he showed a diagram of one. And you will see this information again. Next. Okay, operating systems. Changes in the marketplace. That's obligatory. I'll talk very briefly about NT and Digital Unix, which I think is holding its own, doing well. And OpenVMS, which like the Tough Thumping song, when it gets knocked down, but it gets right up again, because you're never going to keep it down, particularly as long as people want to buy it. A gratuitous Digital slide, based on an aggregation of research done by 5 U.S. analyst organizations and 4 out of 5 top dentists, which said, quite obvious to most of us, that we will be using a mixture of operating systems. Next. Well, this one's another one. I think it's here. It's here, like it or not, it is here. Scalability remains the real big problem. problem. That and having to, what's the solution to Microsoft application failure? Reboot. So Microsoft's availability and reliability strategy is faster reboot right now. The one thing I would say is don't get sunburned by a vendor who has no Windows NT strategy. Next one. Now, I have here, last summer I was up in the Adirondack Mountains in northern New York State, and there they have this thing called the Adirondack Mountain Museum. They got all sorts of mountain stuff up there. They got choo-choo trains, mining cars, old Pullman cars, speedboats, all sorts of stuff from the last century in New York State. They have this diner. Okay, what the heck is this thing doing here? I looked at it. I looked real close. I can't quite read what it says over there. Get the next one. He is trying to take over the world. Look out, McDonald's. As it turns out, up in Old Forge, New York, or Inlet, New York, there was some guy named Bill Gates who had a diner, and this place was famous. No job on the menus, but it does have windows. And we might as well look at this now, because as soon as Bill Gates sees it, he's going to get an injunction against the Adirondack Mountain Museum. They'll have to change the name of their diner. Next. Okay, Unix. Yeah, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they said the mainframe is dead too, and IBM's still partying hardy at the Irish wake for the death of the mainframe. Unix ain't dead either, and it's not going to be for a long time. But there is finally, Bob Palmer's going to be proven right. It was back in '94 at one of the Unix shows in San Francisco that he said, look guys, we've got 12 or 15 different variants of Unix, and each one of us is spending $100 to $150 million a year on the care and feeding and upkeep of basically non-differentiatable base technology. The kernel wars are over. There isn't really that much difference between our operating systems, but we are all reinventing the wheel. And meanwhile, young Mr. Gates is spending a fraction of this amount of money on one operating system with common APIs. I mean, all the stuff we've heard about standards in Unix has reared its ugly head for real in Windows NT. So who's going to win at the end of the day? 12 or 15 vendors each spending $100 million, or young Mr. Gates spending a fraction of that much? So we've seen Digital Unix pick up 2 partners. Solaris just picked up a couple, no big surprise there. And HP just announced that several vendors were committing to IA64 for their, or to HP UX for their IA64 based systems. No big surprise there. But consolidation is inevitable. And if you don't remember anything else, remember this: migrations are never fun and they're never pretty. Fortunately, Digital's been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt. A lot of these other guys haven't. And HP, right now it tries to gloss over the issues. We'll migrate you to 64-bit IA64 when you need to get there. You can trust us. We're Hewlett Packard, your trusted advisor. Yeah, right. If you trust that, I got some time sharing on Brooklyn Bridge I'd like to sell. They got some big problems. You remember their migration from HP CISC to TA RISC? Not a very pretty picture. Next one. Well, we'll see. So I'll say about the future as well. There's going to be rebranding of Digital Unix, more clustering stuff, more consolidation. Next slide. And then, of course, been there, done that, or get the t-shirt. This is ripped off from D.H. Brown Associates, an analyst firm that I worked for very briefly. I served my 6 months penance with them. But basically, there's 2 vendors who have been there, done there, got the t-shirt now, and it's Digital and SGI. And SGI, having gone over to the dark side, to IA64, it's no longer really an issue. But everybody else has got this phased deployment strategy, and a lot of them aren't there yet. Next. So let's look at one vendor is talking about 64-bitness, and the next 4 slides here are ripped off from Digital, but I think they're worthwhile. HP was talking all this nonsense about how they were going to move their OS, and then, on the chip front, now we're going to do this, and that. They had to bring out the PA-85 P500 this year, which was never on their prior roadmap, because remember, P7 was going to be out in 97. And they got to do an HP variant of P7, big endian, to support HP-UX, which is big endian. And, oh, by the way, you recall Steve Zalewski was talking about taking a Wildfire or a next-generation enterprise server. We want to not violate NDA here. Or taking one of these machines and hard partitioning it and running NT in one partition and Unix in another. And theoretically, although I don't know why anybody would want all three, VMS in yet another. Digital can do that. HP will not be able to, because they'll be running these weird mutant big endian IA64 chips for HP-UX, but they'll have to be running normal little endian IA64 chips for Windows NT. And even if you hard partition, I think having different endian byte ordering, it may be theoretically or technically possible for a nice graduate thesis to do this, but you wouldn't want to do it in the real world. So HP's they've got a problem. Next page. They got a real big problem. And for somebody who, everybody is taking it on faith right now that these folks know what they're doing, it's going to be an easy, seamless, painless migration. Take it with a grain of salt. Next. And then, of course, we've got digital. You know, if somebody had told me a year ago that digital Unix had snowball's chance in hell of being one of the standard Unixes, if not the standard Unix in the IA64 era, I would ask them, well, can I smoke some of that stuff too? But all of a sudden, there's digital Unix has got a much better chance to hang around. Certainly, when Sequent partnered with digital, it was a classic case of Solaris interruptus. Sun was not happy. Sun thought they had Sequent in the bag. And there will, I'm sure you've heard all the stuff on Unix, common source code base. The good thing is that having a common code base for IA64 and for Alpha expands the attractiveness of digital Unix beyond the Alpha backyard, which is still a relatively small backyard. And it will attract more apps to digital Unix. Digital Unix now has 500 applications. 500 were added in the third quarter. The quarter just ended. And that's really cranked up. That's all happened since the Intel settlement and the Sequent announcement. And of course, no migrations. And I think digital will be picking up more partners too. Next slide. Okay, OpenVMS, what's new with it? It's very successful, it's very profitable. I missed some of the presentations this morning where some interesting numbers were thrown out. Well, I did see a guy wearing an interesting t-shirt up at Digital. OpenVMS, 104 or 114 or 116 billion dollars in the last 20 years, if you look at hardware and software. That's a lot of revenue. Of course, Viper said we'll support it as long as customers want it. It's now incumbent upon customers to let Viper know that, yes, people do want this. And half the turtle lasers go out the door, go out running OpenVMS. Of those, half of them are to new customers. So while the overall OpenVMS base or installed license base is declining, up there at the high end, where the high margins are, the OS is still doing quite nicely. And in fact, the current OS base, or the current license base, is somewhere between 430,000 licenses. And the Giga Information Group, yet another Gartner spin-off, put out a report a couple months ago saying that by the year 2003, 5 years from now, the OpenVMS base would decline to 200,000. Well, actually, that's not bad. If you look at the rate of decline over the past several years, it's been more precipitous than that. And frankly, by the time it hits 200,000, those 200,000 are all going to be enterprise server users. Yeah, backstation and Alpha VMS station users, they're going to move to something else. And I still think that I think VMS is in a good position financially. Next. Okay, I just threw up Steve's slide. And I'll say a couple things about Galaxy here. See how my definition works vis-a-vis Steve's. New way of using lots of CPUs. You can partition your system. Okay. Shared memory. It's look, digital hates to use this. The easiest way to define it is a cluster in a cabinet. And it's the grandson of a project, or great-grandson, or derivative of a project called Andromeda. Anybody remember Andromeda? It was 64 microvex 2 CPUs tied together with some sort of weird clustering approach. I don't know how far it actually got. Current Galaxy wannabe, the Sun Ultra 10K. Now, Ultra or UE 10,000, whatever they're calling it. Do any of you log in? Do any of you follow the news group, comp.os.vms? There is a Sun bigot out there saying all sorts of stuff about the Ultra Enterprise 10,000 and how cool it is and how badly Galaxy sucks because it doesn't exist yet. And something needs to be done about this guy, but whatever. Pardon? Okay. No, you will find he's out of the UK. He's a consultant. Nigel Harrison or something's his name. I think it's been a while, but he's saying all sorts of things about how great the Sun Ultra 10K is. Actually, it's a good box. Sun got some real good technology from SGI when SGI was dumb enough to sell it to them. But I don't think its dynamic system domains do what Galaxy is going to. Next. Just another, okay, how isn't it a cluster? You know, Galaxy's got a single box. In a cluster, you look at a common data store as your locus or your focal point. On a Galaxy, the shared memory is the locus. And, Sun might say the network is the computer, but on a Galaxy, shared memory, not the network, is the interconnect. Next. I thought I pulled this one out, but actually, it is fully developed. It will be out the end of this year. And back in January at the AEC, Alliance for Enterprise Computing 2 announcement, the Love Fest between Gates and Palmer, January 28th, I believe it was. Microsoft made some noise about a 64 CPU enterprise server running Windows NT. Okay? What's that going to be? Well, you could theoretically take a wildfire and partition it into, what is that, 16? Yeah, you could partition it into 16 CPU nodes and run a copy of Dogpack, well, Microsoft cluster server, on each of them. So, that was their initial approach. A whole bunch of Dogpacks running on wildfire. Maybe they'll see the light and do things better down the road.
So that will be the big dog, huh?
Yeah, that will be the big dog. Now, why did we do this? This is something Steve did go into. There was certainly a strong need within digital and without to legitimize OpenVMS or to justify continuing investing in it and continuing to develop it. Digital is clearly feeling some need at the high end. And when Turbo Laser came out, digital scalability proposition, which up until that time was old DAXs never died, they just joined clusters. DEX approach used to be clustering, then they moved back to SMP. That worked okay with Turbo Laser, but gee, with Turbo Laser, you know, put 14 CPUs on. Of course, you put 14 CPUs on, you get one memory board, one I/O channel, and nobody in their right mind is going to do that. So there are some issues that DEC has to deal with. Galaxy, of course, it's on floor wax and a dessert copy. Okay, I'll conclude on some. The great Karnak here will review my predictions from late last year. Next page. Okay, I said servers are going to get a graphic outlook. Yup, you can get graphics cards on servers now. Pretty soon that high-five stuff will be out, Megatech-derived stuff. There'll be some really good graphics. Digital finally announced what they claimed was their first SMP workstation. They lied. The first one was Backstation 3520, 3540 Firefox about 10 years ago. But the ultimate workstation, the 533AU, finally came out. Digital also did the blue and white product launch where they they did all the renaming. We now have digital servers and, digital servers and digital servers. But we have the blue boxes, Top Gun Blue, of course, for OpenVMS and Digital Unix, and the Frost White boxes for Windows NT. Now, Frost White boxes cost a lot less than Top Gun Blue boxes do, so Digital had to do something to make sure, there might be an unscrupulous customer out there who would buy one of these El Cheapo white boxes running Windows NT and then, kind of stumble across a CD-ROM with Digital Unix or OpenVMS on it and run this serious software on the toy system. So the Office CPU was lobotomized for Windows NT. They actually went in and hacked the firmware so it can't boot the SRM console that you need for Digital Unix or OpenVMS. Rawhide on steroids, yeah. The TPC test has been out a long time. It wasn't until May 5th they announced the 600 megahertz rawhide, but it goes pretty fast. Next page. Stock value. Well, I did this presentation initially before the merger was announced, but I got in hot water once for predicting the stock value go up. I said it hit 100. I didn't say what year, but it ended up tanking. Artistic workstation. Well, artistic as in Monet. Monet might be a real good name for the Alpha Station, what's it called, 6500, which is 500 megahertz EV6 workstation. You can't own one just yet, but you can buy a EV56 workstation, DEC PW 500 or 600, and upgrade it for a mere $69.95 in, I believe, in November. The prices on the incumbent 600 megahertz systems just came down about 38% too. So it looks like Digital is cranking up the workstations. The one thing that concerns me is that on the information that I've seen on the Monet or the 6500, it talks about supporting Windows NT and Digital Unix. Period. Nice stuff. Okay, Digital's also taken a lot of its VMS technology. I saw the class scheduler product or visual batch for Windows NT. Digital's taken a lot of its OpenVMS technology and moving that over to Windows NT. Digital will become a Microsoft ISV. This stuff will work on platforms other than Digital provided. Galaxy. It'll go from nebulosity to reality this year. And finally, these high-end server rumors, well, they're spreading like wildfire. And Windjammer and Narwhal. Next. Now, as for predictions, he may have, some may say he did, but remember Reagan once said, do I look like an idiot? I don't feel like stepping out on too many limbs. I do think that compact acquisition will be done pretty soon. And then Alpha, Digital Unix, and OpenVMS are reasonably safe. Headcount reduction, yeah. And it's going to be high, but I don't know how high, and I don't know if the powers that be know that yet. And I would say one other thing, both with respect to OpenVMS and to DEC itself. Compact does not have a user group. And I believe that the continued success of DEC is incumbent upon all of us and all the grenades and letter bombs that we can throw Compact's way to make them aware that, hey, maybe this is important. And this, of course, holds true for OpenVMS as well. I have an exclusive picture of DEC Bob Palmer's, Digital's Bob Palmer, consummating the sale of Digital to its new owner. Now, I was just there as a power broker. That's Eckerd over there on the right. That was taken at a deep event in France. Traveling incognito, per usual. Next. So, parting thoughts. The Chinese philosopher who said, we live in interesting times. That was probably one of the best things that a Chinese philosopher has ever said. Obviously, Digital and Compact face some significant challenges. Merging disparate corporate cultures will be an issue. Rationalizing product lines, I'm not sure where this guy's going to fit into the new way of doing things. Neutralizing FUD is also an issue, but it does appear they're working on it. And of course, effectively leveraging channels and partners will be an issue as well. I'm confident that, despite what some of the naysayers say, that the mother of all hardware mergers can in fact work out. Next. And the usual questions and comments. Of course, I welcome your feedback and any rumors you can send my way. There's my email address. And of course, for the coolest, slightly used digital and compact news, those of you who don't subscribe to my newsletter, and I did pick up one new subscriber here today, so the trip was a success. You can go to www.acesoft.com. A friend of mine named Robert Infantino, Investment Software, puts up some golden oldies from Shannon Knows DEC there. So I guess that's about it. It's one more slide. No, I guess that's about it. It's one more slide.